What's up, Zombie Talk 123? I was on vacation and I got baseball news and I was looking through it and I saw Carlos Zambrano retired. Another tirade of his. He was suspended last June. He broke a bat in his knee. He smashed in a water bottle, um, or a Gatorade, whatever. Um, and first of all, let's talk about the breaking bat on the knee incident. Even though that was a while ago, I'm just saying, he's a pitcher. His job is to pitch and to be there for his team and pitch. And he was at the plate and he struck out and he freaked out and broke his bat on his knee. And I know he's a good hitter, but you don't need to do that in front of 40,000 people, whatever it was. Especially when your job is to pitch. Your team is not fully expecting you to get a hit as a pitcher, even though he's a good pitcher, a good hitting pitcher. They don't expect you to get a hit every time you're up at bat. So there's no need for that. And he, have all these tirades. He gets suspended last June from the team. He was talking about retiring after his contract is done. And that was when he wasn't pitching that bad. This year he's been definitely off. He hasn't had a good year this year. Last year he was not himself for sure. But, a few years ago when he was talking about retiring, he wasn't having terrible seasons. He just wasn't having, Zambrano season. When he was a prime pitcher in the NL and they signed him to this huge contract, which, could be kind of argued as trouble from the start. Just kind of like all those contracts that they signed, the Milton Bradley one, the Marlon Byrd one, the Carlos Zambrano one, the Alfonso Soriano one. They've signed so many contracts that seemed good at the time, but just haven't worked out at all. And the Soriano one you could see coming when you're giving a guy like that 7 years when he's not even that good defensively in the outfield at all. It's not good at all. And he was a second baseman in New York. I mean, I wasn't around when he was second baseman, so I was around, but I don't remember. So please someone tell me why they moved him to the outfield from second. Was he really that bad at defense second? Because, I mean, he's pretty bad in the outfield. And if you could have a second baseman who's hitting what he's hitting now, even though he's had a down season, that's still a good second baseman. Most second basemen don't have that kind of power. So, number one, they should have kept him at second base, unless he's so bad at defense. But I don't know how you can be that much worse than what he is in left field. And they signed all these contracts with guys. Carlos Zambrano, you could kind of expect this. Yes, he was young and he's pitched great before, 18-win seasons, whatever it was. And he was a great pitcher in the NL. And when teams would face him, they'd be scared to face him because he's so good. And he's very tough, too. And then lately it's been kind of that trend where he'll go 5 or 6 innings and allow 4 or 5 runs, and teams are not very scared facing him when he's doing that. And he's had a lot of tirades, just freaking out, and I don't think he's been good for the clubhouse either. Ryan Dempster, said after he left that the clubhouse feels more relaxed now, feels better, and he needs to do what he needs to do. I think that obviously the clubhouse would be a lot better without him, and so. With Carlos Zambrano, he gets on the disqualified list now. 30 days, no pay, no play, away from the team, can't do any team activities. So, understandably, the GM and they got together and they decided that. That's the only thing that makes sense at this point. You can't keep pitching a guy like that out there that doesn't care about his team. He walks out on 24 guys, and I know he was pissed off and he has a short temper. But, I mean, you can't just do that, I mean, he just walked out, he cleared out his locker room and did it, and it was his choice, so he made that decision, and we'll go with it. But I mean, obviously, if he struggled, he really should have just told people after the game he needs to take a break, or he might be thinking about retiring, not just in the middle of the game clear out his locker room and just kind of go. And people didn't even know where he was going, I mean, it was just, he got away and then he returned his stuff, but he's on the disqualified list. So, 30 days, and in those 30 days, he needs to think about, who he is, what he wants to do. And, obviously, he's been a great pitcher. He needs to get back into baseball, and he needs to start pitching like he did a few years ago. He needs to work hard and get back and help this Cubs team because this Cubs team needs it. Next year, this team could actually be decent, They have guys like Darwin Barney, Starlin Castro. I would expect them to try to re-sign Carlos Pena. That's a 30 home run guy right there. And Arauz Ramirez, if he's still with the Cubs next season and he does good, then if he 20 plus home runs, then their infield is all very good. They don't have any really weak spots on their infield. Their outfield obviously is questionable, but they still have Marlon Byrd. He's a solid center fielder. He's been a very good player for the Cubs this year. And, Tyler Colvin's had a terrible year this year, which has really hurt him. But, if he goes back to that 20-plus home run season that he had, 2 years ago, then, this is a young guy, a first-round pick who has a ton of potential that can really help them out, kind of anchor that offense. And then left field, you're going to have many different guys playing left field. Young guys, Alfonso Soriano, young guys. And if Giovanni Soto goes back to what he did in his rookie year when he was an all-star, this team doesn't have that many weak spots offensively if everyone lives up to expectation. But that's pretty much been the story of the Cubs the last few years. They've never lived up to expectations. Those 2 years they were good. They got swept both years in the playoffs. And then, they got all these overpaid players that have just not lived up to expectations. But anytime you sign huge contracts with guys and have a payroll of like $200 million compared to some teams with, $30 million that have a better record than you, you know that your management is doing something wrong. And then, I would say Mike Quaddy, I can understand why they put him a manager, but I think next year they need to find a different manager. I think, he looks like a great guy and everything, but I think a lot of people are saying that he's overmatched as a manager, and I think that it would be better for him to be a coach or something. I think they need to bring in a very professional manager that has been with teams and knows how to succeed with them. I think really the Cubs needed a guy like Buck Showalter, a guy who's been around for a while that can really mentor the young guys, or they can go the route where they get a more young manager, kind of like what the Brewers did with Ron Renicky, and he's done really good for the Brewers this year. So it'll be interesting to see a lot of moves. I don't think the Cubs are going to get Albert Pujols. I'm sorry, Cubs fans, but, a hug with the general manager doesn't mean anything. I mean, yes, it means that he knows him. It doesn't mean that he's going to sign a $250-plus million contract with him. As a Cardinal fan, obviously that's a biased opinion, but I think that he'll probably sign back with the Cardinals. And if he doesn't, I would expect maybe a surprise team, like the Angels. Not very surprise team with the Angels, but I'm saying a surprise team. I'll just leave it at that if he doesn't sign with the Cardinals. But I don't think he's signing with the Cubs. I don't at all. And he hugs a lot of players. I've been at baseball games where I've seen him hug other players on other teams all the time. He's just a really friendly guy, and he knows a lot of players. He's been around for a while. Him hugging the GM, I don't, it created news, but I don't think it's anything really. But again, if Carlos Zambrano can get back next year and can win 14 to 15 games for the Cubs, I think that's, not a too high of expectations. Considering the Cubs team probably is going to be just a little bit above 500 next year, maybe even below. I mean, they're 1,500 right now or something like that. But I really think this Cubs team can actually be pretty good. They built themselves. Their farm system is pretty good, decent. And they have some young, exciting players. Darwin Barney and Starlin Castro are really going to be the anchors of this team, though. And those two guys don't have much power. So they need guys around them like Carlos Pena and Aramis Ramirez. And if they're building this team around speed, then, some of those old veterans, you got to play the younger guys, because they got some good guys up the middle. And they got pitching anchored by Matt Garza, Carlos Zambrano, who knows what's going to happen with Ryan Dempster, and then they have Casey Coleman, who's a pretty good prospect for them for pitching wise. So we're going to see what's going to happen in the next few years for the Cubs. But if Carlos Zambrano can come back next year, all he needs to do to earn that $18 million for next year is to play. But he needs to just play hard. He needs to work hard, and I have no doubt in my mind that he's working hard right now. I'm not saying he's working hard. I'm not saying that he's not working hard or he's not trying. I'm just saying that he needs to find himself again. And whatever that takes, he needs to do it. And he needs to do it for the Cub team. And what the manager was talking about, it's pretty ridiculous to walk out on 24 guys. It is. You can't walk out on your team you've been with all year. You've been with highs and lows. They've had a really disappointing year this year. But they really need to just stick with it, and he just needs to keep pitching. But I do think it's good for Casey Coleman to move up, get some Major League experience. He struggled before, he got hurt and all that, so he does need to get more Major League experience. So this 30 days off, I think the Cubs are actually going to do pretty good. They've won their last 4 series. Their offense seems to be pretty, clicking. They have, pretty good lineup, really. With guys like Starlin Castro, Darwin Barney, you see the catch that he made the other day. Defense and offense. They're really sparking this team. I don't know what they would do without Darwin Barney and Starlin Castro at this point. And Carlos Pena has been very, very good for the Cubs this year compared to last year. Yeah, he's only batting .230, but he's up there in home runs. So, anyway, I kind of rambled on about the Cubs. So if you're a Cubs fan, then you probably like that. But Carlos Zambrano, again, him doing that is just a poor decision by him. But I can kind of understand why he's doing it. He just has such a short temper. He's talked about retirement before. He kind of just like gave up, really. And if he wants to be remembered that way for walking out on his team retiring, then go for it. Just retire this year. But, I fully expect him next year to come back. He already came back. He got stuff in his locker room, and he had to clear out again. But, I fully expect him to come back and try to redeem himself next year, which he should. Any person in the right mind would want to redeem himself, because no way a player wants to leave on a note like that. Oh yeah, I struggled in an outing and I've had a bad year this year. My team's had a very disappointing year this year. I retired with a year left on my contract and $18 million left on my contract. He's $22 million guaranteed left. And then if he gets in Cy Young Award voting, which I doubt he would, but it would vest another option. But, it's just he's obviously had the lowest strikeout ratio this year. He's had a bad year. ERA has been high. Last year he struggled too, but it doesn't mean that you can just retire. You know what I mean? I mean you can, but it wouldn't be the smart thing to do. He has a talent and he should know that. He needs to go out there and use it and show his talent and pitch and redeem himself next year. He really needs to just focus, maybe get 1 or 2 starts in this year. I'm not sure how, if he'd get another start in by the end of the year after he gets placed on the, he'll probably have 1 or 2 more starts at the end of the year probably, if they choose to let him start, whatever they do with that situation. But, I think it's good for the Cubs to get Casey Coleman, and I think it's better for the clubhouse right now, but he really needs to just find himself and, realize there's no reason to get that mad, Very short temper again. Needs to work on that if he expects to ever get signed again by a major league team. Or traded even, you know what I mean? Like, even if the Cubs took up most of the salary, which they've been trying to do, I don't know what team would want a guy who's going to give up 5 runs almost every outing, and then, has a really short temper and does things like that, So he needs to improve himself personality-wise, his temper, and in the game of baseball. So we'll see what happens, but again, Carlos Zambrano, another kind of tantrum, and he retired, but he didn't retire. He's on the disqualified list. So thanks for watching. I'll be Talk 123.